Hey, so good evening. It feels like it's been a long time since I've been on a Zoom actually, because obviously the last Zoom I wasn't here, but it's good to see all your faces and it's good to see some different faces from the PDI group. So um, I know that the usual Go Green guys know the rules, know well, there aren't really any rules, but they sort of know the idea, know the flow. So just for the benefit of any new Go Green members and those who have come from the PDI group. We've got a 2 hour Zoom. We will pause for a break at about 8 o'clock. So you can just grab a drink, you can go toilet, whatever you need to do. Um, so we are happy to count these hours towards your pink hours, whether that's your 40 hours for your pink license, whether that's your 20 hours for your additional training, or your 5 hours if you failed a part three, or you uh, need another pink license, you've been granted a second or a third pink license. If you would like your hours counting, please make sure you've got your cameras on so we can see that you're here. Because if the DVSA ever ask us to double check that or clarify that you were actually here, we can prove you were. And we like to keep you muted as well, not because we don't want to hear you, just because it makes it easier for us all to hear each other. Of course, though, if you'd like to unmute at any point and ask questions, you're more than welcome to do so. And we've also got the chat box, which we will keep an eye on, and we are more than happy to answer questions. And in fact, that's what the Zoom is about, actually. We don't really have a topic for tonight. What we like to do is have an open Q&A session every now and then. Um, Let me pause on that, though. Let me just go back to what I was saying before I lose my track. If you would like your hours signed off, just take a note of the date and take a note of the hours that you've done, and then email Blaine, and I will just pop his email in the chat box so you can take that if you need to. Um, Let me do that quickly. I wasn't very organized then. So there's the email address if you want your hours signing off afterwards. Um, okay, so yes, today is about, well, nothing really, an open Q&A session. So whatever questions you guys have got, whatever you're thinking, whatever your any questions that you've got, or anything you're wondering, whether it's about your part one, your part two, your part three, pink licenses, if you failed a part three, or just general teaching queries, training queries. I mean, any questions you've got. I mean, I did put on the group, please don't ask me what color why the sky is blue, because I don't know things like that. But any other questions you've got. So please feel free to either unmute or pop questions in the chat box, and we will be happy to answer them. We've got myself, got Blaine, we've got Vicali and Phil. I'm not sure if Diana's here as well, but we've got our admin here as well. So we're all happy to help in whatever way we can. So please feel free to ask questions, anything you've got on your mind. And if no one asks questions, we're going to be sat here in silence for 2 hours. No joking. We'll find something to talk about. But I'll give you all a few minutes just to have a think, just to come up with anything that you might have questions about. Um, I'm just trying to think what I can talk about while you're all thinking. Do you know what? Okay, a teaching point for me while you're all thinking and writing questions. Um, One of my lovely PDIs, Jake, he's on here. I'm going to talk about you, Jake. I'm sorry. Jake has got his part three very soon. And we had come up with a bit of a plan. We had come up with an idea. And I said to Jake, I said to him, just go and do that route with your part three pupil before the day. Just go and do that route just to get an idea of any faults that the pupil might throw up, and just to get a feel and get an idea of whether there's anything there that you can then bring into your part three as well. Um, so Jake on Friday, bless him, went with his part three pupil to the area, and I'm sitting there, I'm working at the time, waiting for his little message to tell me how it went, and I'm feeling all confident. And then he says, Laura, the whole road is closed off for roadworks. I can't use any of that route. And that then just completely took out the equation of country roads. So he can't now do that for his part three. I think that for me was quite a good point to remember, actually, of going and just sussing out your part three area, the route that you want to use, even if you're not going to do it with your part three pupil, but just to go and have a look and make sure that the area is still suitable. Because actually, if Jake had left it until the day, he would have been stuck in the mud big time. So just a little point about sussing out your part three area, checking that it's still suitable for what you need it for. Um, and now Jake and I are going to have a great conversation at some point about what he's actually going to do because I'm not worried. It's fine, but we'll figure something out. But it's just a good thing to remember. Um, okay, so Lisa has popped up here, top tips for passing hazard perception. Now I know exactly who's going to answer that. Blaine is part one and part two guru. Hazard perception is his thing. So Blaine, are you happy to answer Lisa's question about top tips for hazard perception? What are your top tips?
Yeah, get it right, really. That's probably the best one. I haven't got a mic, so hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Mhm, we can hear you.
Yeah, but I'm just using the laptop one, which is sometimes bad. And you'll probably be able to hear the dog snoring next to me as well, but that's life, isn't it? I'm not going to put my picture on mainly because I've just got bad internet in the basement. Don't ask. And therefore you won't be able to hear me if you can see me. So, okay, so hazard perception. The main thing, it was hazard perception, wasn't it? Yeah, hazard
Yeah,
perception.
yeah, hazard perception.
Yeah, so the main thing with hazard perception is because you're experienced drivers, that's the problem. And it's not designed for you guys, it's designed for, this might be politically incorrect, but for 17-year-olds with no experience. So they give them more time to see a hazard and respond to it than you would need if you were a class one police driver or an experienced driver like you guys are. So that's the problem. You basically click too early. So the method I use is called a free click method, and I've just made that up. It's not an official method, but it works. So try to tie it in with driving. I think it's the easy way to explain it. You can use this for your learners as well. But when you see a potential hazard, and that could be a kiddie walking quite near the curb down the pavement with his back to you, for example, I would check the mirror. So I'm thinking about maybe taking some action. So I would at that point click. Then as they go nearer the curb and maybe just one foot starts to come off the curb, I would be covering the brake and being really ready now because I'm thinking they still haven't learned. That's when you click again. When they actually step off, that's when you click again. So that's when you would brake. So when you would check the mirror, come off the power or cover the brake, and when you would brake. The advantage of that is it's not a rhythmic, it's not rhythm, yeah, that word. It's not a rhythm, and the computer picks up on a rhythm. So it's not click one, two, click one, two. The computer would give you say no at that point because that's a rhythm. Every hazard perception, the time is going to be different. It might be click, click, click. It might be click, click, click. That makes sense, depending on how quick the hazard evolves. So that to me is the best way to do it. The points, the highest points, your fours and fives, are normally the second click. So they're waiting for the kid to start to step off, where you and I would take action before them. So that's that. Does that sort of make sense? Any questions, anyone on that?
I mean, that makes sense to me, but it should make sense to me, but interested to hear others' thoughts on that.
And do any of you guys struggle because you were just clicking too early and getting no points at all? Because that's the most common. If you're clicking
I
too
think,
late, you probably want to look at a different career.
I know when I
okay,
took my part one, I was caught out many years ago because I was clicking too early on most occasions, and I ended up with quite a dreadful score. Not because I was as dreadful as that score reflected, but because I was just about a second ahead of the game. And I really love Blaine's example there of that moment where you have a potential hazard and um, you you would be checking your mirror in that moment because that creates a real world kind of picture in your mind of what you would be doing. And I genuinely think that would have, when I was doing my part one years ago, that would have been the difference to passing and not.
I get that. I totally get that. And it was something actually I did my motorbike theory a few years ago. And even doing the motorbike theory, I've then got to do the theory and hazard perception again. And even that was like it brought me back to my sort of part one training. And I think what's important, I suppose, for you guys is even if you're at part three, even when you qualify, go back and do it again. For your own CPD, your own sort of continuing professional development, keeping up to date your own knowledge, but also if you're doing those sort of things, you're in a better place to be able to help your learners when they ask these sort of questions as well, because you've done it recently and you've seen the potential problems and you're in a better place to help your learners understand as well. Lisa said, yes, getting too early. Is there a number of clicks that is maximum for each clip? Just in a nutshell, no, there's not a maximum number of clips, but from what I understand, Blaine will correct me if I'm wrong, the computer systems for the DVSA recognize you clicking in a pattern, clicking too quickly, or clicking in a certain way that they might think you're cheating, if you like. So there's not a maximum number of clicks you can put in, but there are certain systems that DVSA use. I don't know if there ever is a specific guideline for what those systems are. I don't know, Blaine, if you know a bit more about that in terms of how the DVSA think you're cheating.
No, the only way that I know, and I have spoken to people at the DVSA about this, is a number of years ago now, but I don't think it's changed. It is a rhythm. The computer isn't the greatest AI ever, so it's just a rhythm. You can click it. When I did mine, I was I think I was the first ADI to do it, because a number of years ago, when it first came in, all ADIs had to go and do it. And I did it at 8 o'clock on the first morning because I wanted to know what this thing was about. And I deliberately clicked a lot, and I mean 30, 35 times, to see if it would, knock me out or whatever. And it didn't. And talking to people, there's nothing to do with the numbers, and instructors and trainers particularly love to tell you you're allowed 20 clicks or 15 clicks or whatever. As far as I'm aware, that's just not true. It's the rhythm that's the problem. By tying in, like I've said, with check the mirror, cover the brake, braking, that's going to be slightly different. That can't be a rhythm. And I see on the group where people say, well, just click one, count 1, 2, 1. That really is going to be picked up pretty quickly, because the system's not that bad. It's not brilliant, but it's not that bad.
I get that. And the comments here are reflecting that as well. In terms of Lisa saying, yep, clicking too early. Matthew saying that the clicking method worked for him. Lily is saying as well, the method worked for me, but you have to be careful not to click in a pattern. And Jordan again says similar and about clicking too early. So yeah, I totally get that. And yeah, that does make sense. Lisa, does that answer your question? Are you happy with that sort of conclusion? I'll just give you a second to type. Yes, thank you. Okay, so let's move on. So Rich says, I'm reading these questions out because I'm aware that not everyone can see the chat box, so I just want to be clear of what we're answering. Rich says, I have my pink starting in March. My first learner booked. She's 53, no prior experience in an area that I don't know well. Apart from going to look at the area, is there any tips on preparing me mentally to get started? Okay, I'm going to answer this, and then it'd be great to have other admin's thoughts as well. So I think my first thoughts are just about confirming everything with your learners. So in terms of your initial contact, and I'm talking about starting right from the beginning. So Rich, you may have already done some of this stuff, but I'll start from the beginning for everyone's benefit as well. So I'd be confirming obviously the name and address, confirming where I'm actually picking them up and dropping them off to and from. Checking that they definitely wanted manual or auto, because sometimes there's been confusion in terms of a learner turning up and they wanted auto or whatever. Just double checking the date and the time of their first lesson that was booked, the length of the lesson, checking the people's ongoing availability to make sure that that matches your schedules and your diaries. Doing a license check code. There is a post on the PDI group about how to do a license check code. So in a nutshell, for anyone who's not sure, the license check code just gives you confidence that they're not banned from driving, they've not been disqualified or anything like that. It will show you whether they've got points on their license. Points on a license doesn't necessarily mean you can't teach them, as long as your insurance covers you to teach learners with points on licenses. That's something you'd need to check with your own insurance. But I will find the post on check codes and bump that up in the group so you can all see that. Check that the people has a provisional license. Not all of them do. They think they can just book lessons. So check they have a license and check they're actually old enough, because you can get a license from 15 years and 9 months old. However, you obviously can't drive until you're 17. Obviously, your learner's 53, so that doesn't apply in that sense. Just checking any medical conditions, any additional needs that the people might have, any driving experience. You may also want to just take down emergency contacts or anything like that. If you're using apps like Total Drive, My Drive Time, I know that you can set your pupil up on there and they can add emergency contacts and things like that. Just confirming the price of the lessons and also how the payment's going to work, and also any cancellation policies and terms and conditions. So that's kind of where I'd be starting at in that sense, and make sure you've clarified all of these things, you've got all of these things sorted, sussed, and confirmed and agreed. In terms of it being in an area you don't know that well, I would definitely go and suss that area out. It might be that you could ask your trainer, maybe your trainer knows that area, or if they don't, then finding an instructor, whether that's a PDI, an ADI in that area, who could give you a few little tips on where the best places are to go and to go and look at, and go and suss it out yourself. Go and look on Google Maps, go and have a look. It might look good on Google Maps, but actually when you get there, it might be on a hill, it might be on a slope. All of these little things that you need to just take into consideration. And in terms of tips for preparing you mentally to get started, I think that first lesson's always going to be a bit scary. It's always going to be a little bit daunting. I do try and make sure that my PDIs have taught learners before they go on Pink, whether that's teaching for free by themselves, whether that's teaching for free with me in the car as well, giving them feedback. So that kind of helps a little bit in terms of having a bit of experience. I would absolutely recommend teaching for free if you've got the means to do so and the way of doing so. Callie and Phil, I know that's more your sort of side of things rather than Blaine. Have you got any tips in terms of that first learner and being prepared mentally and being in an area you don't know, and also sat nav as well? Sorry, use sat nav. Go for it.
So one thing I'd suggest with that with this, and I know you've said no prior experience, so my guess is you've maybe had a conversation with them, but I think that's what the biggest thing I would do. I fully agree with everything Laura said, and I think you're great with these lists. You're way more organized than me for that sort of kind of pre-setting up with first pupils. I would have a conversation with the pupil so you have an idea in your head what you're going to go do, because a new pupil isn't always take them to a nursery route or take them to a car park. It's sometimes they've got experience. So it sounds like you've maybe done that, but that would be my advice for everyone, is if you've got a new pupil, is ring them up, have a conversation. What are they expecting from the lesson? What in their mind, what's that lesson going to look like, and what experience they have? Because I think as experienced instructors, I would still have that conversation, but I think we could turn up and probably deliver any lesson at any point because we've done it enough times and we could do it on the spot. Whereas I think in those early days, you need a little bit of like knowing what you're going to go do and maybe where you're going to go, particularly if you don't know the area. So I think have those conversations with your pupils as much as possible, so you've got a bit more of a plan in mind.
I like that.
It's so funny because Phil and I, we're very similar. He's just said a whole bunch of stuff that I was going to say, so I'm not going to repeat that. But I will say, Rich, one thing that I feel compelled to highlight to you is, if it's your first lesson, you might have a bit of anxiety about that, and that's perfectly normal. If it's with a 53-year-old, as an extension of what Phil said, I think it's really important that you have a conversation with her, and it sounds like you already have. But just get a sense check as to where she's at, because I've taught some guys and girls in their 50s and 60s, and some of them say to me, I am terrified. I am really scared. I've wanted to do this for years and years and years, and I need to do it now for whatever reason, and I'm so scared. And that will play a part in my preparations, because it might be, and I'm not saying this is what you should do, but it might be that dictates where you go. And so where I am in Portsmouth, we have the seafront, and it's a brilliant place to take learners. Now, when I had a lady who was approaching 60, and she said, I'm terrified. I really don't want to be on roads with cars, but she was just far enough away from the seafront that I wouldn't normally take her there. And I had a conversation with her when we first spoke, and I said, look, based on what you've said, I feel like the seafront might be the best location for you based on what you've talked about. it's an area that I'm more familiar with, but I want to be upfront and let you know that it is slightly further away. And so I don't want you feeling like I'm eating into your time to take you further away and wasting time, but you tell me what you would feel. Would you rather take a few minutes extra to get somewhere that you'll have a higher quality of learning, or you'll feel less anxious? It's a wider roads, and based on what you've just told me, I think it might be appropriate. You tell me what you want. And so I note your point about, it's an area that you're not entirely clear on, which, by the way, is okay when you're new. It's unfortunately, when I started teaching, we still had the turn in the road as a maneuver. So anytime I went down the wrong road, I would just pretend that we were going to do the turn in the road and style it out. But from your point of view, it's important to me, Rich, that you know that you can't do this job as easily and comfortably if you don't know what's going on yourself. So I get the impression that you are going to kind of go and see the area that you're going to be in, but also don't be afraid to say to them, if you think it would be beneficial to their learning, how about this area, or how about these conditions that would enable us to have a more successful lesson. So just add that on top of everything that everybody's already said.
I like that. Thank you both. I do like that. Rich has also said he's sort of covered the points I mentioned earlier, and also says brilliant, thank you. Rich also sort of says, would you just approach any ADI for info? There's no other sort of trainers from the company I'm with in the area. And Emma has also added, if you can find a local ADI, they might know of a local WhatsApp group, which is incredibly handy for like local knowledge, road closures and routes and all that sort of thing. And Emma, you're absolutely right. There are definitely groups out there like that. In our area, we don't have a WhatsApp group, but we have like a Facebook group, so similar sort of thing. And it's brilliant for getting advice and support from each other and all of that sort of thing. Rich, I would just go and approach any ADI, go and sit at the test center and just nab someone, just go and take them. Don't kidnap them because that's frowned upon. But go.
Do we know where Rich is?
It's a good point, Rich. Where are you? Because I was going to say as well, ask us because we know people everywhere. So there is a chance that we would know someone who's good to talk to. But yeah, go and ask anyone, or even put on the PDI group, because I can guarantee there's PDIs in your area who would be happy to help as well, or even just to buddy up and just share your training experiences and all that sort of thing. I've heard of that. I've definitely. Oh, that's isn't that Liverpool sort of way, just above Liverpool? It's like up a yes. Okay, my geography is not great, but no, I have heard of that.
We definitely know someone there.
People. Sorry?
I said we definitely know someone there.
There is quite a few people up there. Can't think off the top of my head.
Diana?
Yeah, I
Is that
don't
a bit
think
too south,
Diana
Diana?
goes. Yeah, I don't think Diana goes that far because Diana lives across the water in the Wirral. So, but Diana might know someone actually who's up there anyway. So, yes. I tell you what I will do for you guys. Lindsay's put about being in Manchester as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bump up the post about the buddy map. So we've got the buddy map and people add themselves to the map where you can then go and look at the map and just see who's in your area. So if you're ever wondering who might be in your area, go and have a look at the map. And if you're looking specifically for trainers or an ADI who might be able to help you with training, then do come and talk to us because we've got a separate private sort of map where we can tell you who the supporters are in your area. So let me just find that. First lesson is in sort of the Wigan. I don't even know where that is. Okay, let me bump up the buddy map and we will have a look at that afterwards. I'll make a note to find someone in your area, or the area that you're doing your first lesson. Blaine's put it there. Thank you, Blaine. Blaine, is that buddy map visible to everyone, even if they're not on Go Green? Is that link visible to everyone?
No, that's the Go Green one only. I'm just looking now for the.
I've just
one.
found it on the group, so that is. I'll copy the link as well. But I've just bumped it up on the group, and I'll pop the link here as well, so you guys can save it if you wish to. So, like I say,
too, the reason we have the Go Green ones separate, just for guys that are on Go Green, and know some of you guys aren't, is that if you buddy up with those people, then you know you're going to get the correct information, and you're not going to get But for what you're looking for, then the normal buddy map, which includes ADIs and everyone, you just want to know the area, so that would be absolutely fine. You don't have to listen to what they're telling you how to teach you, whatever. You could ignore that bit and just get them to run you around. People have in the past, and I think this isn't a bad idea, particularly if you can't find something, is to contact an ADIs online or whatever, and even pay for an hour of their time as if they were doing a lesson, just to show you all the dodgy bits and the good places, and don't go down that housing estate because the woman at number 43 comes out with a broom, for example. The stuff, it does happen. The stuff that you wouldn't think, that they can just guide you in those sorts of things, are silly local things. I don't know if the Canyons found the man that used to live in the flats near Canoe Lake, but he was interesting. He's probably dead by now, but
There's a few in Pompey. There's a few guys and girls that have, as recently as the last couple of months, will shout at you if you're parallel parking on their street, not even with their car. I watched somebody have a go at us because we were parallel parking on their street and his car was parked on a driveway. So it's just something we've got to deal with, unfortunately.
yeah, I had it the other day in a car park. Why are you teaching learners to park in car parks? Because we can't get to the roofs of houses. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're professional, polite, and go, that's fine, we'll just move on. No, it's just ridiculous. But it is what, but there are some areas that are like that. And if you don't like confrontation, don't want to get involved, just steer away from those areas.
I generally reckon it's as frustrating as I'm sure all of you guys are gonna experience for yourself if you haven't already. What you have to remember in that situation is how the pupil feels. And if you, even if you are in the right and this person's really unreasonable and you know that you've got the perfect comeback, just remember how your pupil is going to feel in that moment. And at least I ask you to factor that in for their benefit before you go all guns blazing.
You're a role model towards everything, and how you deal with that will shape them as a driver as well. So
Yes.
I completely agree with that. They're going to be feeling well, a bit scared, I suppose, but also, you're a role model for them. Phil, you've unmuted as well. Was there something you wanted to add?
I was literally about to say what you just said. Also, I remember on Friday you getting told off by somebody for leaving your engine on.
I was
And
parked
that
there for
sort of
2
stuff.
minutes.
It's
Yeah,
that sort of stuff you get told off for.
yeah. I wasn't even
Yeah.
teaching. I was just sat there waiting, well, for you and Diana. And an old man, bless him, he came out and he was like, "Can you turn your engine off?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And he was like, "You'd be fined £400 for that." And I was like, "I don't think I will be, but
It's
for the
just
sake of arguing, it's
it's the
safe."
learner car attracts
Yeah.
people wanting to. They expect a higher standard of us, and to actually partly maybe it for certain things that there should be in a sense. We shouldn't be breaking rules of the road. But yeah, I echo that you need to be like, see, we've actually recently just picked up a new pupil, and the reason they left they only had one lesson with their previous instructor, and they left because he was shouting at other road users. And can you see the how that would look, and that pupil, or maybe other of his pupils, go seeing that as okay. So it's your job to be calm, collected, to show this is how we should be acting, and actually even challenge your pupils if they get a bit of road rage, and ask them to think about. I always ask them to sort of kind of think about what's the worst case scenario in that other person's car, like what's going on in their life to maybe make them act like that, because you don't know what is going on in people's lives. You don't know what news they've just had, or situations like that. And I think it's always worth taking that side of it and assuming the worst for them, so then you can have empathy and then react in a much calmer way.
It certainly seems to me that
Right.
there's a lot of instructors that get a lot more problems with general public than others. So it can be down how you conduct yourself. Silly things like not doing a reverse park behind the same car 14 times. I only normally do it once behind that car, and probably once a day behind that car at the most. So changing where you go and what you do, and that can just help. If you're there all the time, you are going to frustrate people, but the trainers hopefully will go through stuff like that with you as well. And so if you see someone come marching towards you and you've got time to get the people just to pull away, then just pull away. It's just, don't get involved.
I think also from a, sorry, Decali, I was going to say something.
No, you're fine.
Just as well that, you know, if you're on a pink license and you're teaching, you may well have sign writing or a roof box with your sponsors, or in your driving school, training schools, details. And as much as we're setting a role model for our pupils, you are advertising your sponsor and your trainer. And the last thing your trainer wants is a complaint saying that you've been effing and blinding at whoever. So you've got to remember that you're also responsible for the schools that you're representing, and just being very aware of their reputation. And if you damage their reputation, it's not going to look good for them, but also that affects you because they're less likely to get inquiries, then you're less likely to get work. So, but it's also from that side of things, think about your reputation and your school's reputation that you're working for.
Yeah.
The other thing to consider, I think is relevant to this, is in-car cameras. If you don't have one, they can be useful in a situation like that may occur. So not just for crashes, but annoyed people and stuff. So if you don't, I would always recommend you get a camera. You can pick them up, you know, for 50 quid for one that's not brilliant, but will record sound and pictures and stuff.
I agree, and like you say, from in general, I mean, like I know this is an open Zoom, so we can go off in any sort of direction. The benefits of having a camera include obviously crashes, incidents, and things like that on the road. Also, like the road rage and proving what happened and how it actually happened, if there was any comeback. And also from a training point of view, there's nothing wrong with getting a dash cam footage off your dash cam and sending it to your trainer or even sending it to us, and we're happy to watch those sort of things and give you feedback and give you some things to go off and work on. So from a, you know, there's so many benefits of having a camera. Yeah. Did you have
I
anything?
wanted to yeah, I just wanted to add what Phil was saying about, you know, influencing. Can you hear me, by the way? Because I'm getting messages saying it's unstable signal. Yeah.
No, it's fine.
Phil said a moment ago about, you know, we need to maintain an appropriate, you know, behavior and be a role model and so on. But also I think a lot of people don't appreciate that. And I really don't like making it about part 3, especially because we're having these wonderful conversations about the general role. But I have known PDIs on their part 3 test. I don't know how familiar all of you guys are with the 17 competencies, but one of them refers to, did the trainer maintain an appropriate non-discriminant behavior at all times? I have watched examiners take points off of instructors, PDIs, because they did not basically do what Phil was talking about. So when pupils have demonstrated maybe some form of discrimination or road rage or inappropriate comments, that might lead to a culture that we wouldn't like. If the PDI has failed to check that correctly, and it normally takes, you know, it normally takes something pretty absurd to, but if I've watched, if the PDI doesn't correct that and an examiner has taken points off of the instructor because it's their responsibility to maintain an appropriate environment within the car. So it's, you know, it's applicable in all senses. It's applicable just because we are professional individuals. It's applicable because we are role models to our learners. It's applicable because you don't want to be sanctioned. It's applicable because you are representing the school that you are working with, and it's applicable for your part 3, and it's just a culture to be getting into.
I like that. And I think, yeah, absolutely spot on. I like that. And it does link into the part 3 quite nicely in that sense. And I think it's definitely something to be aware of. I think we hear part 3s being so much about teaching and the technicalities of that, but actually they are looking at your professionalism as well, and your professionalism of how you interact with the pupil, how you conduct yourself. And like you said, there is a competency that relates to that. So absolutely, if you're not being that role model that we should be, and like Phil said as well about challenging even pupils' perceptions, that comes under that sort of thing as well. So challenging a pupil's perception of what happened, or and just making it into a learning opportunity. So it's definitely important to think about all of those sort of things. Okay, so just I've got a list of the questions that are being asked, but I'm going to work backwards a little bit because the other 2 questions that have been asked are more about teaching. Lindsay's just popped a question here about, is it beneficial for me to have a separate sat-nav? I know it's not allowed to use a phone in the car, so I'm presuming I cannot use it for maps and sat-nav. Okay, so I'm not sure where you've heard that you can't use the phone in the car. So as long as your phone is in a phone holder, you can use that as long as you're not holding the phone and not distracted by it, even if it is in a phone holder. You can use that as a sat nav. So I quite often have Google Maps, and Blaine's just popped up the legislation there as well. I often have Google Maps up, even a lesson. I have the map on my sat nav in my car, but I don't like that one as much because it's a little bit, it's a bit fiddly. I don't like that one. But also, I like using Google Maps on my phone because actually, when a pupil passes their test, they're not necessarily going to go off and get a brand new car with an inbuilt sat nav and all of this sort of thing. They're going to grab a phone holder, put their phone on there, and use maps on their phone. So actually, to get them used to using maps on phones when they've passed, from that point of view, I'd like it in that sense. But there are benefits to getting an actual sat nav, like your TomTom and all that. So the examiners use a TomTom with Start 52, and they use that. So it can be useful to get a separate sat nav in order to get your pupils used to what is being used on test. I like using sat navs for many reasons. One, because I'm always lost. I mean, even with the sat nav, I'm always lost, but that's another story. But it helps me stay on track. It helps me stay a bit more focused. My husband uses a sat nav in an interesting way. He's always late. He always runs over lesson times. So what he does is he puts in the pupil's postcode for the end of the lesson. So when he's out and about on the lesson, the sat nav always says how long it's going to take to get back to the pupil's house. So he knows exactly what time, if they left now, for example, from training and practicing, that he knows what time they'd get back to the pupil's house. So that, in that sense, it's good for timekeeping for him. But yeah, you can use your phone. You can use a sat nav. You can use an in-car sat nav. You can use whatever works for you, basically. Jordan says, does it have to be a particular brand of sat nav? Yep, Callum's put nope. Like Matthew's put, they've got a Start 52, so students can see what they'll be using on test. £100 on eBay. You can get them on eBay. You can get them on selling groups, on some of the instructor selling groups. Like I say, you can pick them up pretty cheap here and there. So there are benefits to all of those things in terms of using your phone, using the in-car sat nav, using the actual sat nav, and it's up to you how you actually want to sort of do that. Admin wise, do you have any other comments on using sat navs and it being beneficial?
Just going to the point of should we get a smart 52 or whatever they're called? My opinion is if you can, you should, because certainly, and look up the settings. I suppose Laura might have the settings in her finger. There's certain settings, it's got to be a certain voice, blah, 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 blah. It's just so they're used to it, because mine can do a sat nav, say they do their phones or whatever, but it talks to you in a certain way. So say bare left, it doesn't mean there's a grizzly on the corner. It means corner. It could, but the problem is half the time it's a junction, not a corner. So just teaching them to listen to what it's saying, but then sort of ignore it. Just getting used to the terminology is quite often wrong. So we'll say across the roundabout. Well, we don't want them going across the roundabout. So if you use your phone, it doesn't tend to say the same things, if that makes sense. And the timing, 300 yards. I had a pupil the other day marked down. She passed, but she marked down because the sat nav said it was on a dual carriageway, which was relevant. In 400 yards, turn left at the roundabout, we were indicated for 400 yards because she didn't know what 400 yards was. So it's about getting them used to the terminology and what it looks like literally, because that can just throw them off. So that can throw their driving off. So other sat navs, particularly other brands, will probably talk to them differently. So I think if you're going to get one, it would make sense to get the one that they use because it's going to cost you the same anyway.
I get that. And so Mike's just popped a thing there as well about route planning, and you can learn your areas. I know Lou, bless her, she always said that she didn't have like routes in terms of test routes, but she made little routes that, for example, she had one that was just traffic lights, and it was a certain route that she'd planned that went through all the tricky traffic light bits, or there was one that was about right turns, and again, it would take them through different right turns of varying sort of difficulty and challenges. And another thing Lou also used to say was she used to have the sat nav on either on the screen or on the windscreen or in a phone holder right from the beginning, right from the sort of first few lessons, because it just gets pupils used to seeing that, used to hearing that, used to that idea. So when you suddenly put a sat nav up 20 hours later, it's not a surprise, it's not a shock, because they're used to it being there. Um, so
Yeah, I mean, I've taken on Lou SatNav recently because mine just decided to die. And yes, you're right. There's things with strange names on them, like bloody
Imagine.
awkward right turns and stuff like that. You can sort of imagine, can't you? And dodgy 2 lanes turning right, so it takes you around all the dodgy bits where there's 2 lanes turning right, and therefore most of the time left would be better, but not always, as we know. So yeah, that can be useful. It's really useful, I think, when you guys are starting out. Going back to the first question, you can put in a good left and right areas. You can put in where your first roundabouts could be. You could put in where you can just do pulling away and stopping, because you are going to feel, certainly on your first lessons, under pressure and panicking and all those things. And anything that can help you is useful. It doesn't have to be the proper sat nav. I use Google Maps on my phone, on my car. I've got like a big information screen, which is the size of like a laptop. And I use that, as Laura said on the very first lesson, that's what they see. It's taking me to where I need to go, not because I don't know where I'm going, but what's the best way to go at that time of day to avoid the traffic, because it's live data. So I use it for that, and I use it for timing. Is another thing you guys might. So in their address to meet them, and I'll save it as the people's name, and then I'll bring it up again half an hour or so before they're due to be dropped off at home, and it gives me a good timing. So that I was 20 minutes this time of night. We can run around here for another 10 minutes, then we need to head back. Just anything to take the pressure away, really, and to make your life easier. And at the same time, they're seeing it all the time. They're not using it necessarily. But after 3 or 4 lessons, I might say, look, send it to your house from the sat nav. So you're just bringing it in sort of through the back door, if you like.
I like that. Rich has also put, can Google Maps record routes? I don't think Google Maps does.
No, that's the reason why it's the TomTom 52 start, because it's the only one that records routes. And the problem is the DVSA have been looking for a new sat nav for a number of years now, and I mean sort of 5 years at least, and they can't find one that records routes because basically they're phasing out sat nav. So I don't know what they're going to do eventually, because you're not going to be able to buy them anymore. I'm not even sure they produce them anymore now. How they're going to carry on doing sat navs on tests, because it's outdated technology. There may be an app. There may well be another app that is in Google Maps where you can do routes. I don't think you can do it on Google Maps, but I'm happy to be put right if anyone knows how to do it.
I
No,
think,
I think
sorry, just with Blaine mentioning apps there, I think you can get the TomTom app, which is
Darren
the
uses
sat
that.
nav
Yeah,
app,
my
and I'm
husband
pretty
uses
sure
that.
you
And
can record a
yeah.
route on that if someone was wanting to go down the route of using their phone rather than buying a sat nav, but they wanted to record routes. I think the TomTom app does that.
No, it
Does it
definitely.
also have the settings the same as the TomTom, so you can set it with the same voice and theirs and all that sort of thing?
I don't know. Yeah, Ben.
We have
Yeah.
one of the ways back to Poole Test Centre, which is the one I'm using with learners at the moment. 90% of the time they get a certain way, and just towards the end it says bear left, and it's a junction, not a bear. So I'm so tempted to just go and buy a bear and strap it to the lamppost to make people smile as they come back to test, but maybe that's just
Sounds like a good idea though. But yeah, I'd forgotten actually. My husband uses the TomTom app. It's like 15 quid a year. So I mean, it's probably in a way cheaper than buying an actual sat nav, because if you buy a sat nav, it eventually after many years it will die. But yeah, my husband uses the app actually. It's quite good. And Lindsay's put there as well about I am just so you're all sort of reassured. I am writing down all the questions, but I'm just trying to answer them in an order that makes sense. Lindsay's put, is there anywhere online that has planned routes in areas with certain features like mini roundabouts, not necessarily test routes, but practice areas? And I don't believe so. I think that's where your local ADIs, local PDIs come in handy, because you can contact them and find out where those little quirky areas are, where the stop signs are, where the mini roundabouts are. For example, I know here we've got a lovely route of 16 roundabouts, just normal standard roundabouts, a lovely area to practice. And again, unless you talk to each other, you just wouldn't know that that's there. So I don't believe there is anywhere online where you can just find sort of features for your area locally. But I would say go and seek out a local instructor. And local instructors are great for many reasons. You know, if your car breaks down, you've got someone you can ask if you can borrow their car. They it might not be available, but you've got a contact. If you need help, you've got a contact. If you need help with practice areas, routes, if you just need a bit of advice, a chat, anything, you've got a contact. So maybe that's a challenge for you all to go and find a local instructor and just make friends with them, just latch onto them, just whatever it is. And you never know when you might need them. Maybe that's a challenge for you all to go and find a local instructor who you can befriend. Okay, so okay, so I'm going to move on with these questions. Sorry, just bear with me. Just wondering in terms of what order to answer to question things. Because some of them are quite similar and I want to kind of answer them together. So I'm thinking those are more beneficial to do after our little break at 8 o'clock. Okay, so let's answer Mohammed's question. I have my part 3 second attempt soon. What should I look for in a pupil to eliminate why I shouldn't take them? So I think to sum that up, what are we or aren't we looking for in a pupil for taking them to your part 3? That's a nice question. Go on, Phil or
Can I?
Decalion, you go on.
I'm happy to go on that one. Yeah, but I actually saw that question and I earmarked it because I feel somewhat strongly about this, but it's a question we get asked a lot when we're approaching our part 3, knowing which student to choose. And for me, I would encourage you go about this in the reverse order that most people go about it. So I think unfortunately Phil has heard me say this a lot, so he's gonna have to hear me say it again. But what a lot of PDIs do is they choose a student they like, one that they for whatever reason they favor, and then they try and figure out what lesson they want to do. And it's almost trying to put a square in a circle, and it doesn't always work because the student you like might not match up with their needs, might not match up with what you're trying to teach. So for me, I try and go about it in the reverse order. So to answer your question about what are the characteristics that I want to be aware of, well, on the part 3, it's not client-led, but it's client-centered. We want a student that we can engage with. We want a student that we can have a rapport with, that we can have a back and forth. I want to know that when I'm on that part 3 test, I can have some dialogue with my student. I can ask them questions and I'm going to get something back. What I don't want is, excuse the phrase, but I don't want a grunter. I don't want the kind of students who've just spent kind of 6 weeks saying, I don't know, every time I ask them a question. There's nothing wrong with saying I don't know, but I'm looking for the kind of student that I can have a back and forth with, one that will give me some kind of response with which I can then build upon and construct a plan with them, and that will make your life infinitely easier. So that's the first thing. Do I have a rapport? Can I have a back and forth with them whereby they contribute to conversation? And the second really important thing is, are they reliable? So if I have somebody who has maybe cancelled 2 of the last 6 lessons, I'm probably not going to ask them. Not because, I suspect that if I made it clear to them that most people would take that seriously. But I don't want someone who's going to not turn up. And that's exactly what happened to me when I took my part 3 test. It was actually a standards check. I took the old part 3 test, but by the time I'd taken my standards check, it was as it is. And my student didn't show up. She messaged me the morning of saying, I can't get there, I'm really sorry. And, to a degree, we can't see that she'd never given me any reason to be concerned that she wouldn't show up. But what I'm saying to you is, if you have somebody that you're thinking about, or if you have 2 or 3 people that you're thinking about, and one of them has perhaps been slightly less reliable, that would help me decide who I'm filtering out. So find someone who is reliable, who you have a good rapport and you can have a back and forth with, so that it is going to be easier for you to demonstrate client-centered teaching and coaching, whereby we encourage them to contribute to the conversation and to thought. And then you build the lesson based on their genuine needs. And I know that's not quite the question that was being asked, but I'm going to tag it onto this. You must build the lesson based on their genuine needs. You can't, unfortunately, take the student I like and then take the subject I like teaching and necessarily put them together. I hope that answers the question. And if anyone wants to jump in on that, feel free. I think Phyllis.
I'm gonna just tag on because I've obviously I've heard you say that before, and I fully agree with everything when it comes to picking the pupil, and the rapport and all of that sort of stuff. What I will tag on to the end of that is to remember it's your part 3, so be a little bit selfish in pick a pupil. Like absolutely, it has to be to the pupil's needs, but you need to pick a pupil that matches the sort of teaching you like, because you want to go and showcase your best ability. So for example, if you love a pupil doing that sort of kind of new stuff and you're really involved and you're prompting loads and you're fixing loads of faults, then take a pupil that's in that sort of category. If you love your pupils, those lessons that are like 10 hours before the end of before you get to your driving test, and you're asking loads of coaching questions and you're getting them thinking and you're developing, then take one of those pupils. If you happen to teach loads of, and this is highly unlikely, but if you happen to teach loads of people who are qualified and you love that sort of interaction, then take one of those pupils. So I think that's find someone who also matches your area. I've done it before with PDIs where weeks before we've got an idea of a person and then we've got them to that point because they're not quite there, and we go, well, actually I'd rather teach this pupil a bit further along. So they've boosted their lessons up a little bit to get them a bit more experience, so you can manipulate it a little bit like that. But yeah, I think be a little bit selfish in taking, and then this isn't always possible because I think with your pool of pupils and your availability and stuff, but I think if you can, try and take someone that shows off your talents.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. When you were saying about taking people, like which sort of things do you like teaching? When you said about, if you like the sort of last 10 hours before test, then that's where I'm most confident. I love the pupils who are like test ready, but asking the coaching questions, digging deeper. I love that. My husband hates it. My husband's an instructor, for those who don't know, but he loves the first 10 hours. He loves the first 10 hours, getting them moving, getting them excited, getting them understanding it. I like it, I'll do it, but it's not my favorite. So yeah, I think definitely agree with that. What was I going to say? I think that was it really. But yeah, okay. So I hope that makes sense in terms of answering that question. And obviously, feel free if we're not making sense to come back and ask. Okay, so I think I'll answer this question because I'm hoping it can be a concise, more of a technical answer rather than a general teaching kind of question. So Lily has put, I'm due to start a PIC license next week. I've been teaching 2 people for free since October, and I've started to get to grip with what I need to do. Of course, still got a lot to work on. However, from next week, I'm due to take on 7 extra pupils, and this worries me. And I wonder, have you got any advice for keeping on track, keeping on top of everyone's needs, and planning lessons? I have decided to start with 3 pupils, 3 days a week, so not to overload or overwhelm myself, but as the date is getting nearer, I feel it's a big jump to take on 9 pupils, and areas that are close to them and their needs and everything. I'm sure people do more to start with, but I also wanted to make sure I have time in between lessons to reflect on the last lesson and to prepare myself for the next lesson. Do you know what, Lily? I think the fact that you're thinking in that way, it shows me how much potential you've got, because I love that you're thinking, I need time between lessons. That's a big point for all of you to take away from that, is you need time between lessons, whether that's half an hour just to debrief, just to message your trainer, just to have a vent, just to take 5 minutes, just to breathe. to go to the toilet, to have something to eat, to grab a drink. And oh my God, you need to be looking after yourselves especially in those first few weeks, because it's easy to forget to eat or not have time to drink or whatever. So make time. Make sure you've got time between lessons. Like Lily says, to reflect on the previous lesson, whether that's messaging your trainer, writing a reflective log about how you felt or your general reflections, and also to then prepare yourself for the next lesson in whatever shape or form that looks like. I also was thinking, you said about keeping track and keeping on top of everyone's needs and planning lessons. So I don't obviously know about your training and your trainers, but you may benefit from something like Total Drive or My Drive Time. There's two apps there that are both good, and I would definitely make use of their free trials. And for PDIs, for Total Drive, it's for free. I don't know if My Drive Time do it for free, do they? I know for PDIs on Total Drive it's free, but My Drive Time might do a similar sort of scheme. But make use of those sort of things, because Total Drive, for example, you can put in your lessons, you can put in your pupils, you can keep track of what you covered, what you're going to cover, and you can write notes, and the pupil can see all of this as well. So they can see their lessons, they can see their payments that they've made, they can see all of their progress, and also even parents can sign up as well to Total Drive to see their pupils, to their children's progress and all of that, which I think is important in terms of keeping a relationship between yourself and the parents from that side of thing. Especially when they're the ones paying. If parents are paying, it's also just nice for them to be updated with where their children are at. So I like that you're starting off simple. I like that you're starting off with just a few people. You're not just going into a 30-hour week with, or 40-hour week with 30 pupils or whatever. I like that you're taking it slowly. In terms of specific advice, that's an interesting one. Phil or Decalion, do you have any specific tips in terms of, I'm just going to sort of read again what Lily put, so just not wanting to overload or overwhelm herself, and keeping on top of lessons and needs and whatnot. Have you got any specific thoughts on that?
I don't know if Phil wanted to jump in there, but I to be honest with you, the main thing is that it's what you've said, Laura. But Lily, I will say that just please bear in mind, were you going on a? Did you say you're going on a PDI, Lily? I can't remember.
Yeah, pink licensing.
Right. So I want you to bear in mind, Lily, when you go on your pink license, there's this kind of misconception that, well, I can make money now. And a lot of people, and it's so mature of you, and this is what Laura was already saying, that they get this kind of free license to start making money. And then what a lot of guys and girls do is they just take too much work. And I understand that. We've all got bills to pay, especially at the moment. It's an expensive time. But the primary point of a pink license is to get the experience you need to then overcome the final hurdle. So it's so mature of you that you are asking these questions, and like Laura says, you're going to have I'm sure you're going to go fine just simply because you're asking these questions. But do make sure that that license works for you, and this next 6 months has to work for you. And of course, we want to take care of our students and their needs, but it's also got to work around your schedules. So I think a lot of guys and girls tend to have half an hour between sessions. You don't have to do back-to-back sessions with just half an hour. You can allocate time between them. You can make the most of those apps, or if you've got progress logs, I definitely would use them. Don't try and memorize things. It doesn't look good if you're turning up for a lesson and you're saying to your students, oh, what did we do last week? Did we do this before? Which maneuver did we do? So have a log, have a system of a log, and allocate as much time as you need between lessons. But it's basically an extension of everything that Laura said. But I just want you to remember that pink license is a period of training and development. It's not just a period of do as many as I need. So it's great that you're taking it that way. And we're all here if, once you've done your first few lessons, I don't know where you are, but you're more than welcome to reach out to me or any of us if you need any advice once you've done it.
I like that. And something you said there as well, it just prompted me to remember about in terms of your area and your route. So again, having time between lessons, not only for yourself, but if you need to go and scope out a new area or something, you've got make sure you've got time to do that. Especially if you're not familiar with the areas you're teaching. Um, my lovely PDI is messaging me, and he's just said, in terms of managing and structuring your day, one thing he had a not an issue with, but it was something that made him consider was that he maybe doesn't like as much doing two brand new pupils together, one after the other, because just a whole stop starting, almost whiplash type sort of thing. Um, and also if you okay, for trying to think how to word it. For example, like I said earlier, I'm not a massive fan of those first few lessons. I don't mind them. I do them. I'm quite happy to do them. Um, but they're not my favorite. So I know that also doing those sort of, if I had three brand new pupils in a day, it would just drain me completely. You'd also sort of get to know your pupils who drain you just generally for whatever reason. They're just a little bit more difficult to manage for one reason or another. Don't put them all in one day. So manage your diaries in that sense as well. So you you're not going to just completely drain yourself. Um, so I I hope that answers that for you, Lily. And again, if we're answering questions and we're not quite clarifying things or answering it in the way you need, um, please do let us know. Let's stop for a quick break. We'll come back in 10 minutes. So just after 10 past. Go and grab a drink, go and do what you need to do. And we will answer some of these other questions. And again, even in the break, if you've got questions that you sort of come up with and think of, feel free to pop them in the chat box and I'll still pick them up. Yeah, I'll see you all in 10 minutes. Okay, so we'll start to come back now. Thank you. And just a quick reminder, if you are wanting these hours signed off for your pink license, just make sure you pop your cameras back on so we can see that you're here. Give you a couple of minutes. Okay, so just a couple of things then that have kind of come up, and again, I'm answering all these questions in a bit of a weird order, but it makes sense in my head, so just go with me. Julie put that she's had a power cut, hoping he won't go off again. Do you know what? I can hear the wind outside, and it's not sounding great. And I know Decalion said earlier about a storm near his area as well. So, yeah, it's not good. Um, okay, so, um, okay, so Lily has said, are there any specific courses or places I can go to find, like that go towards your 20 hours training, additional training for pink license? So she's opted for the additional training. So just to clarify, for your 40 initial hours for your towards your pink license, or for your 20 hours for once you're on a pink license, you must do an additional 20 hours within 3 months or before you book your part 3. Now, for either of those, for your 40 hours or your 20 hours, or even your additional 5 hours, if you fail a part 3, or if you are granted a subsequent pink license, you must do those hours and record them on the forms. So for your 40 hours, it's an ADI 21T. And for your additional hours, your additional 20 or your additional 5, it's an ADI 2180. 80, not 80 as in the number. For any of those hours, things that count are any time you spend live in the presence of an ADI. So that could be meeting an ADI for a Costa. It could be sitting in the back of a lesson and watching an ADI teaching. It could be you delivering a lesson and an ADI sitting in the back of your lesson, giving you feedback and teaching. Or even, to be fair, if they don't give you feedback, as long as you're in the presence of them, that will count. It could be a phone call. It could be a Zoom call, like now. As long as we can prove you are here, that can count. Anything like that in the presence of an ADI will count. Things that don't count are things like you watching videos by yourself at home, or you meeting with PDIs, that won't count. Anything that you do by yourself without an ADI live, even if an ADI was talking in a video that you're watching, if it's not live and in the moment with them, that won't count. So, in terms of courses that, or places you can go to for specific things like that, any product out there, you can Google instructor training courses and materials and content out there. There's loads of content out there. You just need to go and find, first of all, something that works for you, something that relates to you, and where ADIs are talking just in a way that makes sense for you, and looking for courses or materials that have things like live Zoom sessions, or offer sort of one-to-one support, or where you can do Zoom sessions with them, or even, like we said earlier, making friends with an ADI locally and just meeting them for a Costa. As long as they're willing and happy to sign off your hours on a pink form, you can go and have a Costa with them, and that will count. So Lily said, you know, she wasn't sure whether she'd be able to count this Zoom as a sort of a towards her hours, and absolutely you can, because we've got several ADIs on here from our admin point of view, so we can definitely assign off those hours. Lily, your other sort of question was about open Q&A, and Lily said I thought this Zoom was going to be about open Q&A, as in Q&A in general, in terms of asking questions in lessons. So I can understand where the confusion's come from that, and I apologise for that confusion. Lily's put, even though my pink starts on the 29th. Okay, so your 20 additional hours can't be counted until your pink starts. Okay, so sorry, in that respect, yeah, this won't count for you specifically, because it has to be from when your pink license starts. Okay, so anything from that date on would count. So in terms of open Q&A, you've put about lose 14 days to wake up your questions, and also Nina put a question up about, can you point me in the right direction on videos for digging deeper? Because I'm told I don't do this enough. And the Callian sort of replied there as well. So we do have Lose 14 days to wake up your questions. Brilliant course. For those in Go Green, you already get it included, so it will be on the Teachable site. For those who aren't on Go Green, you can purchase Lose 14 days to wake up your questions. I think it's about £15, and it's yours for life. So basically, 1 day a week. I'm just going to pop the link in the chat box for you guys. 1 day a week. Sorry, rephrase that. Every day for 14 days, you'll get an email in your. Do you know what? My brain is not working. You'll get an email sent to your inbox every day for 14 days. And it's basically a video where Lou explains different ways to ask questions, talking about why we ask questions, how to ask questions, different tips, techniques, and everything. And it gives you things to go off and practice in your lessons, different ways to ask questions, different homework sort of things that you can go off and try. And it's yours forever. And I remember I purchased this about 6 years ago when I became an instructor. And even now, I still go back over it maybe once a year, because every time I go back over it, I'm looking at things in a different way or from a different perspective. The Callian's put there that it will change the way you think, and it really does. It really changes the way you think and the way you ask questions and just your thought process and your mindset in terms of those questions. So I think for you, Nina, and also for you, Lily, as well, in terms of asking open Q&A sort of questions, I think my first bit of advice would be go and do Lose 14 days to wake up your questions. Go and have a look at it. Go and see what you think, and come back and tell us how you're getting on with it. Come back and tell us how you know what you're thinking and if it's been working for you. And if you still got questions after that in terms of open Q&A and wanting to dig a bit deeper, then definitely come back and talk to us. We're more than happy to give you more advice in that sense. But I think definitely for anyone, go and look at Lose 14 days to wake up your questions. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the questions that were asked earlier. Phil, is it yourself? I think it might have been Decalium. I think it was Phil. You like the phrase "see it, say it, sort it," or not like it?
Like it. Oh no, I don't. I'm not a huge fan of it. Did you want me to be a fan of it? I can be a fan of it.
Quite the opposite. I mean, let me read out the question for you because I remember you explained this a while ago, and it made sense with me as well. So, the question was, I often hear "see it, say it, sort it," but I really don't understand this because if you see something wrong is going to happen, why can't you be proactive and say something to prevent it from happening? Or am I wrong in thinking that way? Because I remember lovely Lou used to say, our pupils are never independent. So I really want some clarification on that. So take it away, Phil.
Yeah. Yeah. I think see it, say it, sort it. I don't know. Maybe it has a little bit of a place. It's kind of comes from the old way of teaching and training. When we were doing PSTs and it was all role play and your exam was going to be role play. See it, say it, sort it kind of had a place because you would see the fault the examiner made, you would say something about it, and then you'd sort it out. So yeah, I think in a way that has, and there's probably still a little bit of a place for that because pupils will make mistakes and you need to spot that and you need to have a conversation about that. And then you need to put a solution in place. And I think the wording is my issue in a way because say it is not necessarily what you want to do. It is possibly more likely that you want to ask a question and get the pupil to reflect on what's just happened. But I suppose see it and say something is the key, but more likely it needs to be a question. And then the sort it part, again, it kind of sounds like it should be you guys sorting it, but it shouldn't. It should be you encouraging the pupil to come up with a solution to go forward and put that into practice. But I also agree with what within the question there that if we've got see it, say it, sort it in our head all the time, it sounds like we're going off for a drive, waiting for something to go wrong, and then we're going to do see it, say it, sort it. And actually it's the opposite. We need to be, I suppose if you wanted to use it proactively, it should be a case of you see something coming up, say something about that with a question, and that will sort the issue before we get there. So you can, in a way, sort of use it in a proactive sense of as an instructor, you should be seeing stuff way down the road before ahead of your learners, having conversations about that so that you're proactively sorting it if you wanted to. But I do also think from a PDI point of view, when you're new, like as experienced trainers and instructors, we probably look at it and think it's too simplistic. But maybe I do get from a PDI point of view when you've got so many things going on in your head, all these sort of kind of questions, that if you want to spend a lesson just making sure that you are putting solutions in place for things that have happened, because I do think that's a big thing that gets missed when you're a PDI, that you guys have a tendency to let stuff go. Whereas if learners in my card, nothing gets missed. So I think if that is an issue that you have and you know and you're aware of that in your training, then I personally wouldn't use it, say sort it, but have something in place. Something that I use with my guys, which is similar, is focus, support, and solution. So having those three things in mind lets you know that you're always in the right, you're always aiming towards a focus, like what's our current focus at the moment. You always have a solution in place for that focus. So this is us being proactive now about these things rather than reactive. And then if something happens, your see it, say it, sort it becomes, let's change the focus, let's change the solution, let's add in some new support or change the support level. So maybe that might be a better way to sort of kind of go about it. But yeah, it's too simplistic for me, is the issue.
I like that. And Emma says there as well, it's interesting because everyone sort of seems to say it. And I think it is a bit of a hangover from the old PST type things, isn't it? And obviously I'm not familiar as such with them because when I trained, it was just changing over. So it was never something I had to sort of learn. But it's maybe a very old school sort of thing that comes up. Thank you for that. I like the way you've explained that. And I like the way you explained it in terms of how you can use it proactively, because that's a good one. I like the way you explained that. Okay, so what else have we got? If you have a pupil doing, let's say, meeting situations, so I'm just reading that question, wondering whether it might be better. Okay, pause on that because this kind of links in. Gozal says, aren't lessons supposed to be goal focused rather than fault focused? And how everyone sort of makes it sound these days. Phil, do you have a sort of a continuation from that? Because I kind of feel like that's actually kind of a sort of continued thing. Do you want to answer that one or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that goes back to what I was saying about my focus, support, solution. You're absolutely right that your lesson should be goal focused. And if you are being goal focused and supporting the pupil in the right way, you're going to be preventing a lot of faults that happen. So if you're, for example, if you know a pupil needs support in certain areas, then up your support in that so they can focus on what their goal is. I'm just trying to think of an example now. So let's say, for example, your pupil is trying to work on their approach speed to a roundabout, but they still struggle with their decision making on the roundabout and maybe their positioning as well. They're not quite sure about the lanes and which lanes to choose. So if to be sort of goal focused in that situation, you would be working towards their speed by asking them questions, having a conversation about how are they choosing their speed, what are they what factors are they taking into account when judging their speed? So you're using all of that towards that goal of, can we work out how to approach at a different speed? But while you're doing that, you're going to be supporting them with the positioning, whether that is telling them to use the left lane or prompting them within the left lane, and you're going to be supporting them with their decision making. So you're taking those parts from them, you're taking responsibility so they can focus on their goal. If you were trying to work on the approach speed and you weren't then supporting with the positioning and the judgment on the roundabouts, then you would find that faults would start falling in on those other things, and they would get in the way of your lesson. So you'd have to then change your focus to sort of kind of deal with those things happening as well. So I think if you want it to be goal focused, you have to support them on the stuff they can't do. Otherwise, this is when you maybe get into that firefighting where you're trying to deal with several things at once. And if that happens, it's normally you're in the wrong place and it's too difficult for them, or you're not supporting them enough with the stuff that they can't do. So that's one way I would get it for being goal focused. I think the other thing to remember that you absolutely should be picking up their faults that they make, but then you turn them into a goal. You turn them into a focus, and it's quite interesting. I sit in the back of lessons, and I always say to my guys that when stuff is happening and then gets missed and ignored, at the end of the lesson, when they say to the pupil, like talk to me about your lesson, give me some positives, what happened from your lesson, they always list the stuff that went wrong and go, oh, I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that. Whereas actually, if you have then taken that mistake that's happened, turned it into the new focus or goal or whatever word you want to put it in, put a solution in place, gone and sorted it, at the end of the lesson, when you say what's gone well, it's always the stuff that actually started off with a mistake. So maybe they stalled or whatever the scenario was, it becomes the positive at the end of the lesson because you went and sorted it out. So that's where when we talk about being goal focused, it doesn't mean don't pick up on faults. It means turn those faults into the new goal, go sort them out and achieve that goal. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that, and that makes sense. It's a nice continuation. I like the examples you used there. Thank you. Emma says, I find it difficult to determine one goal and therefore how to split responsibility, which is what Phil is now sort of describing. In 45 minutes for part 3 is tough. I agree. 45 minutes, I think that's a good point, to be fair, in terms of the length of your lessons, because if you're doing, for example, 2-hour lessons every day, all day, 45 minutes on your part 3, in fact, only 40 minutes of that really is actually teaching. That's hard. So if you are doing 2-hour lessons or even an hour and a half lessons, try and split that into 2 separate lessons almost. So if you're doing an hour and a half, perfect opportunity to be doing 2 45-minute lessons, if you like, within that one lesson. And your timekeeping is essential. So making sure you're keeping an eye on the time. I know that probably Phil and Callie here can back me up and blame that you just know when it's been an hour. You just have that natural instinct to think, I know exactly it's been. For example, I kind of thought it when we had the break at 8 o'clock. I just sort of that instinct, that natural timekeeping kicked in, and that comes from experience. That isn't something you can learn as such, but it comes from experience, and you guys will get that. But especially as PDIs and on your part 3, don't be afraid to just keep an eye on that time and try and get your head into doing that on your normal lessons, to make it as easy as possible for you.
Can I just expand on that, because it's similar sort of kind of thing where experience comes in is knowing when to go back home. Because I think when you guys start, that can be really challenging. And it does come with experience, and I don't know how I do it, but sometimes I'll turn up to a pupil's house and we will have been 40 minutes away from their house, and somehow we just always get home on the right time. Some like inbuilt internal sat nav that's constantly redirecting, rerouting in my head. And actually, this is something that was a bit of advice I want to give, is we have that sort of kind of internal sat nav going on, but in those early days, there's nothing wrong with using a sat nav for that purpose. So put the sat nav on, put the pupil's home into the sat nav, turn the sound off, turn it away from the pupil so then it's not distracting them, and it will constantly reroute, letting you know exactly how far from their house they are. I would give them a few more minutes than the sat nav suggests because they're not as quick normally. And so that can be a good way of sort of kind of starting to help you with that process of working out how long it takes to get back home.
I agree, and especially when you're in areas you don't know as well. That like I said, it comes back to sat nav. It can be really beneficial, and you can guarantee you'll get nearly all the way home, and then your learner will take the wrong turn, and then you've suddenly got that sort of like you say, that internal sat nav. I like the way you described that internal sat nav of rerouting, thinking, crap, like where are we going now? I like that. Okay, so going back to some earlier questions, Shelley says, if you have a pupil doing, let's say, meeting situations, but the pupil had to do things on the route to your practice area that you've not yet covered, how is it best to deal with this? Sometimes we get PDI's question, can you drive your pupil to a practice area on your part 3? Now, since the part 3 has changed since COVID and it's kind of kept the same format, driving your pupil to a practice area, it's not allowed. Like you could do it. However, there are far more cons to doing so. And just in terms of your timekeeping and the actual time your people will then have to practice after you've swapped seats, they've got comfy in their seats again, they've set their cockpit up again. And in terms of then driving to that area, like you say, Shelley, you can absolutely take your people to a practice area, even if they've not covered some of the things on the route. And there's nothing wrong with just saying, we've got to cover this roundabout, particularly that we've not done before. And there's nothing wrong with just upping your level of instruction to get yourself there. Now, obviously, if they really cock it up on the way and you've got a big issue or big fault that you need to fix, then you may want to think about adapting the lesson. And that's kind of another story, if you like. There's nothing wrong with upping your level of instruction to deal with that. In a nutshell, I'm going to briefly answer that question, but I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please come back and ask. Phil or Decali, do you have anything just to add to that? I know I've answered that briefly, but we've got further questions I want to make sure we get time to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like repeating what's been said, but I was going to say what you already said, Laura. But I think what I would say to that is bear in mind that, and there's any number of reasons why you might come across things that were not planned for the session that you had, and that's not necessarily a reflection of anything you're doing wrong, but I want you guys to be clear about roles. Yeah. So if you say that we're doing XYZ skills today, and then you happen to find yourself in an environment where something completely out of the pupil's depth occurs, something completely unpredicted, maybe you were diverted, maybe there was an incident on the road, whatever the case may be, it's not necessarily that you've done anything wrong, but if you find yourself in that environment and you're thinking, oh my God, this student is not capable of dealing with this, well, that's where we go back to those those roles. So presumably you have begun your lesson with a clear vision of, you are responsible for this, I am responsible for this, and sometimes I am responsible for this will incorporate anything other than what we've talked about. And so if we're going to go and do meeting traffic and junctions and this, and you're going to say, I'm going to allow you to do this and this, or we've agreed that you're going to do this and this, and I'm going to do this and this. Well, anything outside of that, there's nothing wrong with you saying, I'm going to help listen to my voice or focus them to a new level of instruction dependent on where they're at and what they're capable of. So there's nothing wrong with you providing support on that, as long as all parties are clear who is doing what in this scenario. And we have to be realistic. You can't in a few moments explain every plausible scenario. This is what you're going to do if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. But that's why we have, you're responsible for this. Anything outside of that, we've agreed I'm responsible for helping you with this and this in this fashion to whatever degree.
I love that. And I think that is just a reflection in general of of lessons as well as your part 3. It's just that communication of who's responsible for what, and that has to be an ongoing communication. And if you take back some sort of level of control or responsibility to make sure that that's communicated and then handed back over once the situation has been dealt with and whatnot. So I like that answer. Thank you. The last 2 questions, sorry, there's 3 questions. Just briefly, so Jordan has said he's looking at purchasing a lesson plan. Sorry, Lily's just put on, again, I want to try and keep these all together sort of thing. Lily's put, in the moment, you could also ask the people if they're happy to try it. Definitely, as long as there's, again, some communication that that's what's going to happen. And in terms of how that's going to look, so are they just trying it and winging it, or are we sort of trying it with a little bit of support from us and what that actually looks like? So as long as it's specific, and everyone knows what everyone's doing, then go for it. Jordan has said, I'm looking at purchasing a lesson plan book from like the ADI Ninja. I've been using it with my mentor for my part 3 and it's brilliant. Does Go Green have anything for visual teachings and lesson planning? So we do have the visual aids, but I don't think it's not quite like ADI Ninja is. I don't know exactly what ADI Ninja does include. I've not actually looked through their books, but I think that is more in depth than what we have in Go Green. So Go Green is your basic visual aids that you can use to explain things as you're going along, to help them understand things or to explain things and whatnot. So I will pop a link up for the Go Green visual aids. So for those of you who are part of Go Green, you have those already. You can also purchase the visual aids separately. So for those who aren't on Go Green, you can either join Go Green and get the visual aids, or you can purchase them separately, and I'll find the links for you in a second. So I hope that helps, Jordan. Like I said, I'll pop the links up in a second. So Pradeep asked earlier.
Laura, can I just recommend what I use?
Yeah, sure.
Just because I think there's a particular reason, and I don't want to be saying
I'm
other
not massively familiar in terms of what products there are out there that offer lesson planning. So go for it if you've got something that.
Yeah, so there's the one I use is a set of diagrams, and you get little toy cars with them from Fiona Taylor. I'll pop a link in once I finish talking. Now, the reason I use these is, and probably over something, and I don't want to be slacking off other companies, absolutely, but over something like ADI Ninja is, from what I know of ADI Ninja, is they're really, it's quite comprehensive, and there's lots of diagrams, which is great, but it also has lots of information on the page. And I think that distracts from a conversation that you'd be having with your pupil. So it kind of goes back to the old PST things where we would be expected to just talk at the examiner for 20 minutes in a briefing sort of kind of thing. And it goes back to that sort of style. So you had all this information in front of you so you could recall it back to the examiner. Whereas in reality, what you should be doing, so for example, I have a little roundabout and one, and I will pass it over to the pupil with the toy cars, and I will ask them some questions, and they will be able to explore where to position their cars and what to look for with these toy cars. And it allows you to have these coaching conversations in a safe environment. So because they can't crash a toy car, rather than go and actually do it in real life. So that's why I love them. That there's no words on the page distracting from your coaching conversations, and the toy cards really enable the pupils to explore and experiment with their answers. So yeah, there's that one, and there's 2 companies out there that do those sort of kind of diagrams. So I'll pop a link in the group.
Perfect, thank you. Like I said, I'm not massively familiar with. I've seen bits on Facebook, but I've not really looked into exactly what that includes. Lily's also put, does anyone have a visual aid app that works on Android? And there's a good one for the iPads. I think is it Neil Beaver and the Road app or Road Board or something. But I don't know if there is anything for Android. But for example, the visual aids we've got with Go Green, and possibly some of the other stuff as well, like the visual aids on Go Green, I know that you can use them on your phone, on tablets and whatnot, so you can use that. Gordon's also put about try Pocket Instructor, and that's a good one. I've used that in the past. I don't know, I've not used it recently, so I'm not sure what the content is like now. But Phil's put a link there for Fiona's one as well.
Just on
So-
the Android one, if we go back to talk about Total Drive earlier, Total Drive now have a scribble sort of kind of thing on their app. So you can, wherever you are, Google Maps effectively will come up and it'll allow you to draw over the top of Google Maps, which can be quite good if you need to, I don't
I
know,
like
point something out.
I like that. And do you know what? Sometimes my best bit of visual aids is just actually a whiteboard and just actually making it up and just drawing what you need to draw. So I like that, being able to scribble what you need to do.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, all it was is because I don't know anything else to use other than the ADI Ninja that my mentor's been using. And it is good. I mean, you get like one page will be a lot of information, a lot of questions and answers. And then the next page will be like a visual diagram. And it gives you, say you have roundabouts, it'll give you different examples of different roundabouts. You can have 2 roundabouts next to each other, mini roundabouts. It is really in depth and it's all laminated. So we use Sharpies and
Yeah,
you know,
draw.
you can wipe it off and things like that. It is good, but I just wondered if there was anything else because I'm quite a visual learner, so I'd rather learn from watching someone do something and then give it a try, or rather than sitting there reading a book.
Mhm.
So
100%. And like I said, I think that's also a reflection on how you learn, and also that to remember that pupils learn differently as well. Pupils might want to go away and read some material or look at something, about watch YouTube videos, and like you say, some of them prefer to sit down with you and look at that sort of visual stuff. So I
I
like
mean, the ADI Ninja is quite pricey. I think it was like £84,
Mhm.
and you get the manual and automatic
Mhm.
with it, sort of thing. So I was just looking at purchasing it because I thought it's another thing to have up your sleeve, But if I will have a look if there's anything else around as well, definitely. I
you
quite
won't
like
go
what
green
Phil
already.
said he had there.
Yeah, like I say, you won't go green already, so you've got the visual aids there, so you can have a look at those and see if they sort of meet what you're looking for. Then, like I say, have a look at what Phil's recommended. Have a look at the ADI Ninja. You're using it anywhere with your mentor, so definitely it's good to have those options. I like that.
Yeah, lovely.
So say
Thank
the
you.
Go Green one, without you've got to go already have it. Have a look at it and see what you think. You can either print it off and laminate it if you want to use it that way. You can download it and put it onto a tablet or a laptop if you want to do that. Make sure engine's off, keys out, all that sort of stuff. So it can be used in different ways, but have a look and see what you think.
Yeah,
A
definitely.
bit
Thank
like
you.
Phil said, that there's no words on it, and that's deliberate for the reasons that Phil was saying.
Yeah.
You don't want to be learning a script and reading off the thing, and you can get them to tell you what the different bits are rather than it all being there. They're
Yeah.
deliberately less messy, but use what you guys think. But a lot of you will already have access to that. So if you haven't found it yet, I'll put a link in the chat box, and if you're
Yeah,
logged
please,
in,
thank
it'll
you.
take you straight there.
Thank you. So I'm just going to try and move on as quickly as I can because you've got 3 things still left to cover. So, Golazar, you said you wanted to unmute and ask a question, so feel free to do that now, and we will answer.
Hi, Laura. Thank you. Just a quick one on what Declan said earlier on. So at the start of the lesson, if you divided your roles and responsibilities, and let's say the goal of the lesson is speed and approach at the roundabout, and the pupil is happy to take responsibility for your T junctions, your traffic light junctions, and at the end you might have said I will prompt you at times. If you do see a delay in them responding, and from which point will you need to change the focus of the lesson? Is it when you prompt or when you fully guide? So for instance, if at the traffic light junction you're turning right and you've had to prompt them, but they've not clicked on yet, but then you're guiding them through because they're stuck. At what point will you need to change the focus of the lesson?
Okay, I hear you. Calin, do you want to answer that? I'm just thinking as a continuation of what you were saying earlier, or I'm happy to answer it.
I was struggling to hear that. Can you summarize it and I'll answer it?
I think so. I suppose, is it more about the when to change the focus of the lesson and also changing the responsibilities?
Yeah. So if it's obviously at the start of it, they're happy to take responsibility, and they've done it many times previously, but prompting might be there. Will you have to change the goal of the lesson by prompting, or when it's fully guided?
So if I've got you right, so are you talking? I'm sorry, I want to be clear about this question before I answer it. So are you talking about a scenario where if you've had to change the roles because you found yourself in a scenario that your student isn't capable of handling? Is that what you're asking, or am I mishearing?
Yep. So you will so for instance, they've done traffic light junctions previously.
Yeah.
And approaching, and they're happy to do it on their own, but you've realized they've started the process quite late, so you're prompting them. But those prompts are not helping them; they've just frozen. So when you've had to fully talk them through that, let's get a bit more further up and let's wait, let's look ahead, wait
Yeah.
for the filter to come up. Will prompting intervening by prompts, will that be good enough to change the focus of the lesson, or will it be talk through when you have to change the focus of the lesson?
So if you have a student, and again, tell me if I'm misunderstanding, but if you have a student who has done whatever topic or subject or skills before, and on the day of their test, they are not addressing those subjects the way that you previously have seen them do it, then it's appropriate to adapt the level of support you give them, because and I'm just talking about for your part 3 right now. If you're on your part 3, all the examiner cares about is their shown level now. So if you've done pedestrian crossings before and you have agreed that their support will be XYZ, and then they're not able to achieve the goals and the lesson plan because they're not stepping up to the standard that they've been up previously, then all you care about is finding them the appropriate level of support in this moment right now. So if that means you go back to giving them full talk through, if that's appropriate and that's the only way you can get them back on track, then do that. If you need to ask them questions and prompt them, then do that. And you can do that for a few minutes or 30 minutes if that's their shown level before you then bring them back up, if at all. But I'm a little bit concerned I haven't perhaps answered your question.
No, that's right. That's right. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got 2 questions left. Any more questions that do get asked, I think we will answer them on the group maybe later, or maybe on another Zoom at some point. So one question we've got here, which I'm hoping will be a simple answer. Mike said, question about your part 3. I'm starting to prepare for my part 3 test. I'm aware that I must be flexible to whatever the need is for the day, but I'm struggling to find a current pupil who is suitable, and I seem to have somehow ended up specializing in anxious pupils. We do spend a lot of time then discussing that. So is managing anxiety a suitable subject? And therefore, if it is, affecting sort of self-confidence and therefore decision making? I want to answer that question, but I'm also thinking, Phil, you said something earlier about teaching subjects and also your skills. And I think that actually links quite nicely in terms of decision making. Do you think that managing anxiety could be linked into that together nicely? Or
Can you just repeat that again for me?
So basically, in a nutshell, is managing anxiety a suitable subject, especially if it affects decision making and confidence?
Interesting.
I'm
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. I think so, because
if it's got
I think if I was doing it on a part 3,
Mhm.
I would be inclined to use scaling
Mhm.
so that you could have a clear, so your pupil actually, not you, so your pupil could have a clear idea around the progress made. But yeah, I don't see it being, if that's their need, that they have anxiety, I'd maybe want to dig into, are they anxious of everything, or is it a particular thing? And then maybe dig into, is their anxiety caused by being anxious, or is it because anxiety, you can be anxious just because you're anxious, but you could be anxious because you have a lack of competence. And if it's because of a lack of competence, I'd want to go and fix the lack of competence. But I also agree that you could be fully competent and also still anxious. I think Adele is also a really good example of that because she's amazing but pukes up before going on stage. So the I think you can absolutely go and deal with how do we be good at this and override our anxiety and put things into place. As long as you are showing learning is taking place and you're putting in solutions, I think absolutely you could do that. But I think I'd be inclined to use something along the lines of scaling, whether that's numbers or whether it's your pupils describing their feelings along a scale, to show, I suppose, to show the examiner that you've got something tangible that you're working with.
Yeah, I like
Can
that.
I,
I think
can I add
that
to that?
focus. Yeah, go on, go for it.
Sorry. I think because I had somebody recently that I was helping who had this exact scenario. And for me, and it is different. Phil's made a really great point. Like some people just have anxiety because they have anxiety. Some people have anxiety at certain subjects or certain things or certain environments. But for me, as a generalization, broadly speaking, I would be more inclined to get specific, and a lot of people laugh at me because I use that word too much, but we need to get specific about what is the anxiety preventing? Yeah. So the anxiety is the cause, but what is it leading to? So I had a student some time ago who had massive anxiety about slip roads, getting onto dual carriageways and motorways. She was absolutely fine in every other aspect, and she could rationalize, and she, like Phil has just said, you could talk her through, and she could understand it, and she understood exactly what she was doing, and we could study it till the cows came home. But doing it, she was hyperventilating, and I'd spent so much time building up to this. Listen to my voice. I'm here with you. We're going to do it. We're going to change all of the environments so that it's perfect for you. We're going to pick the time of day where there's going to be minimal traffic on the road. We're going to try and go to the areas where the slip roads are normally really long and really great visibility and not much traffic. And she was still hyperventilating and panicking. So what I would say to I forget who asked the question, forgive me, but whoever asked that question, think about what is the anxiety then preventing, and then how can we tackle that? So we can absolutely work on techniques to tackle that anxiety, but then ultimately it's like we want to overcome the anxiety to then improve the things that are then going wrong. I think you can absolutely focus on anxiety, but it helps to have a clear vision of what is the anxiety actually obstructing us from doing in our lesson.
I like that. Thank you. I'm trying to move on quickly. One more question to ask. And I'm just going to quickly add to that. There is also the ADI disability group on Facebook. So it is open to PDIs as well. But if you've got any questions, queries, or anything like that that relate to additional needs, disabilities, physical learning needs, etc., the guys in there are brilliant. They're really good. So I'm going to pop a link to their Facebook group, and then you can go and join that as well. Even if you've not got a need to be in there, there is also some really fascinating stuff to look at, from anxiety point of view to physical needs as well as learning needs. Okay, this last question, Decalion messaged me and said he was happy to answer this question. Decalion, I'm going to put you on a timer, okay? You're going to have, you've got, let's say you've got 4 minutes to answer this question, okay? And then we're going to wrap it up. So, Pradeep says, are there any thought-provoking questions I could ask on meeting situations? Because my learner struggles on judgment on meeting situations. Now, before Decalion answers that, I'm also just going to refer to Phil. He did a lovely post with some lovely questions and examples. So I'm going to put that link in the comments so you can all go on to that on the PDI group. So there's some good stuff on there in terms of questions. And Decalion, I'm just going to read that again for you, and you've got 4 minutes. So are there any thought-provoking questions I could ask on meeting situations, and my learner struggles on judgment on meeting situations? You're muted, by the way. That's ticking into your 4 minutes.
Sorry, you got me. So every situation is different, but in terms of the judgment, I think that you need to be asking the questions. You need to ask the questions that make them think before they're in the scenario. So don't ask the question when they're in a meeting traffic situation and there's a car driving at them and you have parked vehicles on your side and we need to make decisions now. We need to ask them the questions before they're in that scenario. So a great way to do this is ask what if scenarios. So go to places where there might be meaty traffic situations, but you probably think that they won't have them, and then ask them in different environments the kind of questions that would aid their judgment. So how if a car came, you start with some basic ones. So if a car came now, what factors would you take into account to make that decision? And they haven't got that high pressure environment, so they don't have to give you an answer there, but they have the time to think about that scenario. So you can ask the questions that are ahead of time. So like, if a car came now, what options do we have? What spaces do we have? Tell me what you're looking at. Tell me the kind of things that will help you decide whether you would go or not go. I strongly recommend, if you have a student who's struggling with that, put them in what if scenarios where the pressure isn't on, and ask them the kind of questions that make them think. So where are the next opportunities to pull in? Where are the spaces that we could pull in? Who would be pulling in and why? Who would concede or give way? What's your logic? It's probably not that you're not asking the right questions, but it might be that they just need to not be asked them in that moment until they're good enough. But it's all the kind of questions that are like, what factors would you take into account in making the decision to go or not? You tell me why you made that decision or not. You tell me why you think it's best to not go or to go, and just put it on them. And the beautiful thing about that is, whatever answer they give you, whether it's really wrong or really right, you can then delve deeper. That's really interesting. Tell me how you came to that. Tell me what factors you considered. And then you have this wonderful conversation where they gave you an answer and you get to explore their mind, and every now and then they might come to you with a response that you never expected. That's probably the best I can do in sub 4 minutes, but I hope that kind of gives you some inspiration.
I love that. And I can hear your brain ticking. And I think if you had the next half an hour, you could carry on talking about it. And I think it's tricky because these questions are so open, they're so good, and there's so much juicy information. And I think that's kind of where Go Green comes into it, I suppose, is because Go Green does have all that juicy information on there. Yeah, I think between all of us, Adam, we could talk for hours about all this sort of thing. And it's hard when we've got a sort of set limited time. But I like that. I do like that. I've popped also the link to the questions that Phil had and whatnot. Thank you for that, Decalium. And you actually did that in like, well, 3.5 minutes. I'll give you that.
That's
That was
good for me. I'm normally wrong. I'm normally way too long.
I was going to say, I feel like Phil said, it's that internal timekeeping, that internal sat nav you were thinking. Okay, so I hope that this evening has been useful. I always get worried with these sort of Zooms. I'm thinking, what if no one has any questions? But you guys have been brilliant. So thank you. Now, I feel like we could do this all night. Like, I'm sure many of you have more questions. If you do have questions, please either message any of us admins or pop it on the group, and other PDIs can also answer that for you. And obviously, as admin, will pop along and just clarify things and just clear things up if needed and give you our thoughts as well. So I haven't scheduled the next batch of Zooms, if you like, but the next Zoom will be in 2 weeks' time. Haven't decided on a topic yet either for that. However, I'll be doing that in the next couple of days, and I will make sure that's on the PDI group for you all. So for those who are part of Go Green, you can sign up again to the next batch of Zooms. And if you're not on Go Green and want to be, then of course you can sign up if you want to, and you would get access to the Zooms, which we do every fortnight. So I hope that's all been useful for you in one way or another. And for you guys on Go Green, or who might sign up to Go Green, we'll see you in 2 weeks, and we'll see you all on the group anyway. So thank you and good night.